Long had been the road that led Gimli, son of Gloin, from the deep mansions of Erebor, through the fires and perils of war, and into the grace and blessedness of the undying lands. It was said among the elves that no other dwarf had ever set foot upon the shores of Aman, let alone stood within sight of Valinor's golden light. Yet Gimli was beloved by the Eldar for his unwavering friendship with Legolas of the Woodland Realm, and for his devotion to Lady Galadriel, who, in her wisdom and mercy, secured him passage across the sea. Thus it was that in the waning days of the Fourth Age, a single ship bearing an elf of the Woodland Realm and a dwarf of Durin's line crossed beyond the circles of the world known to mortals, and arrived upon the hallowed shores of Tol Eressëa. Here unfolds a speculative account of Gimli's days in the Undying Lands, a portrait woven from wonder and rumor, for no mortal scribe of Middle-earth could have witnessed these events. Yet in the telling, we may glimpse something of the enduring spirit of the one who was named Elf-Friend, a dwarf of surpassing loyalty, and the ways in which his heart found both peace and new labors under the immortal sun. It was upon a morning unmarked by the reckoning of Middle-earth that Gimli first set foot on the grey-white sand of Tol Eressëa. The vessel carrying him and Legolas had withstood the final swell of the sundering seas, guided not by mortal charts, but by the blessings of the Valar themselves. There, upon the shore, the dwarf peered across a land that seemed ever shrouded in soft, luminous mist. Pale sunlight glinted across the bay, and the gulls of elven home called overhead in voices eerily sweet, as if formed of music more ancient than time. Legolas stepped lightly onto the sand, his keen eyes bright with a mixture of awe and tempered sorrow. A sorrow for all that had been left behind, and an awe for the marvels that lay ahead. Gimli, by contrast, stood stolidly, the waves lapping about his sturdy boots, leaving footprints that made him grin ruefully. Perhaps the very sand was shocked at the presence of a child of Owl upon these shores. He felt small, dwarfed not only by the majesty of the open sky, but by the subtle hum of power coursing through this realm. Even the air tasted new, carrying a freshness he had never known. "By my beard," he muttered, resting a broad hand on the haft of his axe, though there was no threat here. "This land has a weight to it, Legolas, as if it sings under our feet." Legolas inclined his head. "Aye, Gimli. So it is said in ancient lore, that all living things in Aman resonate with the great music." They stood side by side in silence, and though it was a new land, their companionship was familiar and strong. Indeed, it was their bond that allowed Gimli's presence here, an unthinkable blessing. When at last they turned to walk inland, they did so with measured steps, anticipating wonders and unknown welcomes alike. Word of Gimli's arrival had flown swiftly along the hidden paths of Tol Eressëa, for these shores, though separate from Valinor proper, were in union with the land across the Bay of Aldemar. Swift messengers in silver and green cloaks carried tidings of Legolas's coming and that of his dwarven companion to the elven city of Avalone. Thus, ere they had travelled far, an escort of Eldrin folk approached, tall figures robed in shimmering fabrics, their hair gleaming like starlight, eyes bright with curiosity. The leader of this company was Arian, an elf lady of Noldorin kin. Her voice was warm, and she greeted them in the rolling, melodic Sindarin tongue. "Legolas Greenleaf of the Woodland Realm, and Gimli, son of Gloin, be welcome to Tol Eressëa. The Lord Finarfin sends his regards and wishes you well." Legolas returned the greeting with stately grace befitting an elven prince. But Gimli, despite the courtesy instilled by years of close friendship with elves, found his dwarven directness reasserting itself. He bowed, somewhat stiffly, but respectfully. "I give thanks for your welcome, and for the blessing that allowed me to set foot here." Arian's gaze rested on Gimli kindly. "Yours is an honor never before granted to your people," she said, voice tinged with wonder. "We shall see that you are cared for it is said you are beloved by the Lady of the Golden Wood." Gimli felt a quickening in his chest at the mention of Galadriel. His loyalty to her was unwavering, and he had often recited the memory of her gentleness as a guiding star in his darkest moments. In silent acknowledgement, he placed a hand over his heart and inclined his head. If there was any doubt among these elves about the presence of a dwarf in their midst, he resolved to prove himself worthy of Galadriel's trust. Thus, escorted by Irian's company, Gimli and Legolas set out for Avalon. Marvel upon marvel greeted Gimli's eyes. Groves of ancient trees with leaves shimmering like mithril, blossoms of radiant hue that perfumed the air with a sweetness reminiscent of Lothlorien. The architecture of the elves loomed like a half-remembered dream, woven of living wood and shaped stone, with archways so slender and graceful that Gimli wondered at the skill needed to craft them. And everywhere, the light, gentle yet pervasive, neither fully of the sun nor the stars, but a mingling of both. Avalone was a harbour city, famed for its white towers that gleamed like pearls under the ever-bright sky. As Gimli approached, the city spread before him, wide piers of pale marble stretching into azure waters, terraces filled with flowering vines, and domed halls upon a rising hillside. Here, many elves had come to witness the arrival of the elf prince and the dwarf. Their hush was not unkind, merely curious and laced with reverence for the uniqueness of the occasion. For some, Gimli's presence evoked the memory of the great tales of the Third Age, of the Fellowship, of the War of the Ring, and of a time when elves, men, dwarves, and hobbits stood united against the darkness of Mordor. Irian led them into a grand hall, open on all sides, letting in the gentle breeze and the scent of the sea. High pillars stood in a circlet, their capitals carved with motifs of leaves and stars. At the heart of this hall waited a dignified elf lord clad in deep green robes, a silver circlet upon his brow. This was Ingwion, one of the Vanyar who dwelt upon Tol Eressëa at times, a close advisor to the High King Finarfin in Aman. Legolas greeted him with a respectful bow, but Gimli, though measured in posture, kept his dwarven forthrightness. He would kneel to none save the Valar themselves or the memory of Lady Galadriel. Yet his bearing was not insolent, only honest, and Ingwin smiled. "Welcome to you, Gimli, son of Gloin," Ingwion said, in a voice that seemed to echo with the music of far-off harps. "You come as a friend, and so shall we receive you. May the light of these shores bring you gladness, and may you find no less joy here than what you once knew in Middle-earth." At that, Gimli inclined his head in thanks, his braided beard brushing his chest. "You do me a great honor, Lord," he said quietly. "I can scarce fathom what fortune has brought me here, save that Lady Galadriel herself intervened on my behalf." "You shall find Lady Galadriel across the waters in Valinor," replied Ingwion, gesturing westward, where the Pelori Mountains rose in ethereal majesty. "Yet until the day comes when you feel ready to travel yonder, be at peace in Avalone. All hearts here are open to you, and the artisans among us would hear the tales of dwarven craft you bear." That last point stirred Gimli's spirit, a soft fire lit in his dark eyes. "I am ready to share what knowledge I can, if the elves are willing," he answered, voice layered with the pride of a master craftsman. Thus began Gimli's sojourn in Avalone, where he and Legolas were given quarters in a high house overlooking the sea. Whenever he could, Gimli walked the marble quays, listening to the gentle breakers and thinking of the friends he had left behind in Middle-earth. And yet the first seeds of new wonder were planted in his heart as he glimpsed the artistry of the Eldar in Aman, which surpassed even the greatest works of Middle-earth. News of Gimli's presence soon reached the ears of certain Noldorin smiths who dwelt upon Tol Eressëa, and it was not long before an invitation arrived. A small group of elven artisans had formed a guild dedicated to studying and preserving the ancient crafts taught by Aule in the First Age. They maintained a hidden forge at the base of a low mountain range inland, a place where silver springs ran clear and hot, and where the earth yielded metals of an otherworldly sheen. Upon receiving the invitation, Gimli felt his heart leap, for though he cherished the elves and valued their music and lore, he was a dwarf, ever drawn to the beating heart of a forge. Without hesitation, he prepared to journey to this place, taking Legolas's half-amused, half-affectionate blessing. The elf was glad that Gimli had found a pursuit that would engage his dwarven spirit. The route led him past ancient groves where trees of silver bark and gold-flecked leaves grew in silent majesty, along paths that glimmered underfoot with crystals embedded in the soil. At last he arrived at a low valley where stood the forge, part workshop, part living sculpture. The stone arches were carved in fluid lines, reminiscent of elven design, but the interior was a place of hammered anvils, bellows, and the gentle roar of flame, a mingling of elf and dwarf aesthetics, though Gimli guessed the dwarven influence came from the ancient teachings of Aule rather than from any direct dwarven hand. He was greeted by a master smith named Meris, a tall figure with hair the color of burnished copper. Her voice carried the warmth of a hearth fire. "Gimli, elf friend, we bid you welcome," she said. "From you we hope to learn of the skill that shaped the glittering caves, that wrought the gates of Minas Tirith anew, and that delved the ancient halls of Khazad-dûm." Gimli chuckled, his tone humble but laced with pride. I can share a tale or two, though I fear the skill you ascribe to me is but a fraction of what my forefathers possessed. Still, I shall do my best to honor my kin." At that, Meris led Gimli into a chamber lit by glowing crystals set in the walls. Here were row upon row of tools, each delicate and wrought for a specific purpose. Indeed, Gimli recognized some of them, for deep in dwarven lore there were references to crafts taught by Aule in the elder days, and it seemed the Noldorin had preserved a memory of them. His heart swelled, for though he stood among elves, he sensed the spirit of his own people in this place, the gentle hush that accompanied the forging process, the reverence for metal and stone. These were echoes of ancient times, bridging the gulf between elves and dwarves. Thus Gimli commenced his labor, and in the process found a healing of spirit that he did not know he needed. Day by day he worked the bellows, shaped glowing metal upon the anvil, and taught the forging of dwarven runes to the curious elves. In return, he learned from them new techniques of shaping mithril-laced alloys, and the subtleties of Ea's deeper music that thrummed through the metals. Often they would sing while they worked, their voices weaving around the clang of hammers in a mesmerizing harmony that infused each blade, each artifact, with a rare, enchanted quality. Though days in Tola Eressëa were gentle and seemed unending, night came as well, a twilight under starlight that Gimli found reminiscent of old stories of the elves' first awakening by the waters of Cuvienen. On one such evening, after he had toiled in the forge and parted from his newfound companions, Gimli found himself alone on a quiet ridge. The firmament above sparkled with constellations that seemed closer and more vibrant than ever they had in Middle-earth. He thought of Aragorn, now gone to the gift of men, and of the hobbits, Frodo and Sam, who had also crossed the sea in their time. He wondered if even now Frodo and Sam were somewhere across the water in Valinor proper, healed and at peace. He thought of Merry, Pippin, and of the wizard Gandalf who had once guided him. Most of all, he thought of his own people, of the lonely mountain, of the dusty halls of Moria where Balin had once tried to reclaim a realm of glory. Here, in the hush of Arman's starlight, Gimli felt a pang of longing. A dwarf's heart, he knew, was bound to stone and hearth and the memory of kin. Though he had chosen to sail with Legolas, the price of immortality's haven was the distance from his homeland's mortal rhythms. Yet he consoled himself with the knowledge that his presence here was no betrayal of his roots. Rather, he was fulfilling an ancient bond, bridging a chasm of misunderstanding between two proud races. "Master Gimli," the voice was soft, belonging to an elf, Arian, who had greeted him upon his arrival. She came to stand beside him, her golden hair catching the glimmer of the stars. "You miss your home," she said gently, not as a question, but as a statement of empathy. Gimli nodded. "I do. Yet I also feel the wonder of this land more keenly each day. To have both longing and gratitude, that is the nature of a mortal in the undying lands, I suppose." Aelian smiled, placing a hand lightly on Gimli's sturdy shoulder. "We too know longing. Though we do not fear the passing of time in the same way, our hearts remember. For the Eldar, memory is a living thing, never fading, whether it be sweet or sorrowful. You bring a piece of Middle-earth with you, and that is a gift. They stood together in comfortable silence, the starlight singing above. It was then that Gimli realized that, while he could not change his mortal nature, the very fact that he was here added a new note to Amon's eternal harmony, forging a lasting bond between dwarf and elf that went beyond the old songs of strife. Word reached Gimli that Lady Galadriel dwelt beyond the Pelore Mountains in the region of Valinor known as Eldamar, though she often visited the heart of Valinor and the Valar themselves. On a morning bright with promise, an escort of elven sailors offered Gimli and Legolas passage across the Bay of Eldamar. Gimli's heart pounded at the thought of reuniting with the lady who had once gifted him strands of her hair, a gesture of trust and honor that had reshaped the dwarves' entire perspective on elves. The voyage was serene, the water mirror-smooth, reflecting clouds and sky in such perfect detail. It was as if they sailed through air. Legolas stood at the prow, hair billowing in a breeze that carried the scent of distant gardens. Gimli remained amidships, gazing at the horizon. He caught glimpses of the towering Pelori, mountains so tall and gleaming they seemed woven of gemstone and light. Where they parted, a passage of unimaginable beauty allowed entry into the heart of Valinor. From the deck, Gimli watched the coastline unfold, an expanse of rolling hills, forests of silver and gold-leaf trees, and beyond them the faint glimmer of Tirion upon Tunia, the fabled city of the Noldor. White towers ascended skyward, with crystal lamplights that sparkled even under the midday sun. When at last they disembarked upon a quay of white crystal, a host of elves in flowing garments awaited them. Though none spoke, Gimli felt no tension, only a serene welcome. At the fore stood a figure of radiant presence, hair of shimmering gold, eyes keen and bright, Galadriel, now restored fully in the land of her birth. Gimli bowed low, tears forming unbidden at the corners of his eyes. "My lady?" Galadriel approached, her expression warm, almost motherly. "Gimli, elf friend, how it gladdens my heart to see you here at last. Long has your devotion been remembered, and now you stand upon this shore not as a guest alone, but as one whose spirit is dear to me." Her voice seemed amplified by the very air of Valinor, echoing across the water's surface. Gimli rose, cheeks flushed despite his gruffness. He recalled the moment in Lothlorien when he had first been overcome by her beauty and compassion, and that memory guided his words now. "I am ever in your debt, lady, not for gold or gems, but for the kindness and wisdom you bestowed upon me." A smile tugged at Galadriel's lips. "Your debt was paid long ago, Gimli. Walk now with an unburdened heart. Come, both of you, Legolas and Gimli, into the light of Valinor." In the days that followed, Gimli explored Eldamar under Galadriel's gentle guidance. The city of Tirion upon Tuna stood upon a green hill, crowned with Mindon Eldalieva, the high tower whose silver lamp was said to shine even across the sea to Middle-earth in days long past. Streets of pale stone wended through terrace gardens, and at the city's heart rose a grand citadel of alabaster walls etched with elven script. Everywhere crystal fountains laughed, and birds with iridescent plumes offered songs unlike any Gimli had heard. Galadriel introduced him to scholars and lawmasters who recorded the ancient tales of Arda, from the first rising of the sun to the War of Wrath, from the forging of the Silmarils to the downfall of Morgoth. Though a dwarf, Gimli felt a kinship with these historians, for he had seen with his own eyes the consequences of ancient evils in Moria, and had stood against the last shadow of Morgoth's lieutenant, Sauron. Yet more compelling to Gimli were the invitations to meet with master jewelsmiths and stonecarvers. Among them were some who had apprenticed under Celebrimbor in the Second Age, or learned the traditions passed down from Feanor himself. They spoke of gemlore, of forging techniques so precise that each piece seemed to capture an echo of the stars themselves. In turn, Gimli shared the dwarven craft of runic inscription. He demonstrated how the runes of Khuzdul, carved with a steady hand and kindled by the heat of a forge, could imbue metal with certain protective qualities. While the Noldor had their own modes of writing, the novelty of dwarven runes fascinated them. Gimli found himself in lively debates with these master smiths, discussing the differences between working with mithril, galvorn, a rare black metal of legend, and the prized ores of Valinor that sang with hidden harmonics. Always he remembered to speak with respect, for he was aware that these elves had honed their arts over millennia. Still, they returned his respect, for knowledge of dwarven craft was rare in a man. Such labors filled Gimli's days with purpose. He rose early, enjoyed a hearty meal in the halls of Tirion, and then set to work in the forges or ateliers, forging alliances of artistry as once the races had forged alliances of arms. Whenever he felt a pang of homesickness, he would recall that dwarves were, after all, the children of Aule, and in Valinor, Aule's domain was near at hand. It was as though, from somewhere in the unseen realm, the Valar watched over him with paternal pride. A rumor reached Gimli's ears that Aule himself had expressed a gentle curiosity about the dwarf who dwelt among the Eldar in Armen. Awe and trepidation seized Gimli's heart at the prospect. The Valar, after all, were the great powers of Audar, beyond the reckoning of mortals. Yet Aule was the maker of the dwarves, the one who shaped them in secret at the dawn of the world, longing for students to share in his craft. One day, Galadriel approached Gimli while he was contemplating a new design for a gem-studded axe. Her voice was gentle but compelling. "Gimli, if your heart is ready, Owl has granted you leave to visit his halls." Gimli felt his breath catch in his throat. "Then I will go, though my knees may quake." Galadriel smiled, placing a hand upon his shoulder. "Fear not. Owl's love for his children is deep. He will not bring you harm." Thus, accompanied by a few elves who knew the secret paths, Gimli ventured into a region of Valinor seldom beheld by outsiders. The lush fields gave way to rocky outcrops of a peculiar hue, like polished marble the color of dawn. In the midst of a wide plain rose a vast structure hewn directly from the living rock, its doors so tall they seemed like mountainsides themselves. Strange carvings decked its facade, scenes of creation and forging that Gimli recognized from dwarven mythology. Stories of the seven fathers of the dwarfs and of their hidden halls. As he passed through the colossal archway, Gimli felt a tangible warmth emanating from within, accompanied by the low hum of constant resonant music. The entrance hall was grand, lit not by torches or crystals alone, but by a soft radiance that seemed to come from the stone itself. Each step Gimli took echoed mightily, as if the entire hall were a single immense drum. His guides left him there, receding into the background with quiet courtesy. Suddenly, a voice neither male nor female, yet embodying aspects of both in wondrous harmony, reverberated through the hall. "Welcome, child of the dwarves." Gimli felt the hair on his arms stand on end. The voice was gentle, yet it carried the power of deep places, the solemn hush of the world's foundations. He sank to one knee, bowing his head. A presence shaped itself before him, a being tall and regal, robed in earthen hues, eyes glimmering with creative fire. This was Aule, Valar of the Forge, the builder of Arda's substance, and the one who had formed the dwarves in the darkness before the world awakened. Gimli could barely speak. "My lord Owl," he stammered, I come with gratitude and humility." Aule's eyes softened. "Rise, Gimli, son of Glóin. Your presence here is known to me. You have shown courage and honor, forging friendship with the firstborn. That bond has borne fruit, even in a man." Gimli rose slowly, chest tight with awe. He sensed no condemnation, only an all-encompassing acceptance, like a father welcoming a long, absent child. Aule lifted one hand, and a faint shimmer passed between them. "There is craft in your spirit," Aule said. "A reflection of the skill I placed in the hearts of all your kin. Let me see the work you have done in these last days." Though trembling slightly, Gimli offered up the axe he had been crafting. A piece not quite finished, yet already exhibiting delicate filigree and inlaid runes. Owlie took it in hand, turning it slowly, eyes shining. The lines are pure, the balance pleasing. The runes speak of unity between dwarf and elf. A rare message indeed. Then Owlie returned the axe to Gimli. Continue to labor with such a spirit, Gimli. In so doing, you honor your ancestors and also the memory of your mortal home. Gimli's voice was almost choked with emotion. I shall, my lord. So long as I have the strength to wield hammer and chisel, I will not forsake what you have given us. Owlie laid a hand upon Gimli's bowed head, and in that moment the dwarf felt a warmth spreading through him. Whether it was a blessing or simply the reassurance of his maker's presence, he could not say, but he knew he would remember it all the days of his life. In time, Gimli returned to the familiar precincts of Tol Eressëa. For though he was welcome in Valinor, his heart found comfort among the forges and the less lofty realms. Legolas remained his constant companion, though the elf often roamed the forests and coasts with other Eldarin kin, delighting in the unspoiled beauty of a man. Occasionally, they would meet for quiet evenings, reminiscing about the fellowship and old friends. It became clear, however, that Gimli's body, though in a place of immortality, was still subject to the gift of men, the passage of years that led inevitably to the end of mortal life. In Aman, he did not age as swiftly as he might have in Middle-earth, for the utter absence of evil and the pervasive power of the Valar seemed to slow mortal decay. Still, he knew that his days were finite. He sought counsel with Galadriel once more. My lady, though I dwell here in peace, I feel the slow turning of time within me. What fate awaits me in this blessed land? Galadriel considered him with compassion. All mortal fates are sundered from those of the Eldar. Even the Valar do not hold the power to undo what Eru Ilúvatar has decreed. Yet here, if you wish it, your passing shall be gentle and free from fear or suffering. Your spirit will depart as all dwarf spirits must, to the halls Eru appointed, and there, perhaps, to stand before Maul, the dwarven name for Owlie, once more. Gimli nodded, comforted by her words. That is enough for me. I ask no more than a peaceful end, and the memory of fellowship while I yet live. Thus, as years turned into decades, though the distinction of time was blurred, Gimli continued his craft and his quiet pursuit of knowledge. The memory of Middle-earth remained with him, but he found a deeper serenity, forging tools and artistry that might endure as a testament to the unity he once championed. Legolas, after many explorations, settled in a glade on Tol Eressëa, inviting Gimli to live nearby. Together they watched the changing lights of the sky. Auroras of shifting color that sometimes flared above Aman like living tapestries. Over time, Gimli's back bent a little more, silver threads wove themselves into his beard, and his eyes bore the contentment of a life well lived. In his final years, Gimli set about crafting one last masterpiece, an artifact that would embody all the lessons he had learned in the Undying Lands. He would not say what it was, only that it required materials from many sources. Mithril from the Noldoran forges, crystals from the hidden caverns of Tol Eressëa, and a fragment of Galvorn, gifted by one of the few who still knew its secrets. He labored in silence, singing under his breath a dwarven tune of the old days, interspersed with elvish refrains he had picked up. The forging took him many months, or perhaps years, for time in Aman flowed strangely. Yet at last he emerged from the workshop with a small coffer carved of white stone shot through with golden veins, sealed with a single dwarven rune. He said nothing of its contents, save that it was a gift. Legolas found him that evening, sitting under a blooming tree that shimmered with starlight. "Is this your final work, old friend?" Gimli looked up, the lines around his eyes deepening in a fond smile. "Perhaps so. I mean to give it to the Lady Galadriel, that she may keep it as a token of all that has passed between dwarves and elves." Legolas nodded. "I shall miss you, Gimli, whenever you choose to depart." The dwarf's gaze softened. "And I shall miss you, Legolas. But think on this. We have done what none before us dared dream. Lived as friends. unbroken by the old enmities. That bond will outlive us both. Let that be our legacy." They spoke long into the night, recounting adventures from days gone by, from the mines of Moria to the Pelennor fields, from the glittering caves to Fangorn Forest, and finally to the sea that had borne them here. Laughter punctuated their tales, and a gentle sorrow wove through every remembrance. In the fullness of time, Gimli felt the weight of years press upon him. The sense of nearing journey's end filled his heart with both peace and a quiet melancholy. Surrounded by friends, elves who had come to love him for his spirit, he found his final rest in a chamber overlooking the western sea. Legolas was at his side, as were Galadriel and other lords of the Eldar. Never had a dwarf passed from life in a man, and so a hushed reverence blanketed the room. Gimli's voice was faint but steady. "My lady, Legolas, all of you, I go now to the care of Mahal. I am grateful for what I have seen, for what I have learned." Galadriel bent low, her eyes shining. "Go with our blessing, Gimli, son of Gloin." Legolas gripped Gimli's hand, tears in the elf's usually bright eyes. "Farewell, my friend." A final breath escaped Gimli's lips, and with it, the dwarf's spirit departed. It was said that a hush fell across that region of Tol Eressëa, as though the trees and waters themselves paused to acknowledge this passing. No one spoke for a time. Eventually, by ancient custom, the body was prepared with honor. Some accounts suggest that, with the guidance of Galadriel, the remains were committed to the earth near a forge he had frequented, so that he might eternally rest in a place of craft and creation. Thus, Gimli's mortal life came to a close in the land beyond mortal understanding. Yet the memory of his warmth, courage, and perseverance echoed long among the Eldar. They told tales of the dwarf who had sought not gold or jewels in Aman, but fellowship and unity. A dwarf who was counted as one of the greatest elf friends in all the ages of Arda. Legolas lingered many years afterward, tending a quiet grove and singing songs of the fellowship and of Gimli's steadfast heart. Sometimes, travelers among the Eldar would come upon Legolas walking alone along the shore, head bowed in recollection. Yet in his eyes was a glimmer of hope, for he believed that in the final music, when all the world's chords were drawn together by Ilúvatar, he and Gimli would stand side by side once more. In Avalon and Tirion, the artisans spoke reverently of Gimli's contributions. The coffer he had created for Galadriel remained sealed, displayed in a place of honor, and it was said that if ever opened it would reveal a flawless unity of dwarven and elven craft. A testament to what hearts can achieve when bound by mutual respect. Among the Noldoran lawmasters, it was written that Aule himself had looked upon Gimli with favor and had been well pleased with the children he had wrought so long ago. Some claimed that in secret starlit hours, the forge in Aule's hall would ring with a deeper resonance, echoing the memory of Gimli's hammerstroke. Others believed that in the far corners of Aman, where the veil to the timeless halls thinned, there was a place prepared for the spirit of any dwarf who came with an open heart. Thus ends this speculative account of Gimli's life in the Undying Lands, a tale woven of mortal perseverance and the gentle mercy of the Eldar. If ever the lines between dwarf and elf were thought insurmountable, his story proved otherwise. And though he was the first of his people to tread upon those shores, in his footsteps might yet lie a path for future unity, shining in the undying light of Valinor. In the final reckoning, Gimli, son of Gloin, departed Aman with humility, gratitude, and the love of dear friends. And so, across the sea, in the hush of ages yet unfolding, the memory of a single dwarf glimmers among the endless songs of the West, a living chord in the harmony that binds Arda's tapestry, forever cherished, forever remembered.